the reason we're putting this show on is because, well, I saw a post on social media last week of a queue of people outside a food bank in London. And the response to that post was lots of people saying it was fake or it wasn't in this country. And I was intrigued to see it. And then as I was driving that day, I actually saw people queuing outside a food bank in Hounslow, which I'd never seen before. And it made me aware that there's an issue that we might not be being talked about, isn't being talked about at the moment on the media. There's a lot about Dominic Cummings, but there's not a lot about food poverty. So I made a short video that I'm going to show everyone now, which is of the clip that I saw on social media. And I interviewed the person who filmed it. And I also spoke to a woman in near Manchester, Pauline Town, who's been running help for the homeless and for food banks as well for quite some time, to ask them what their opinions are on this. So this is just an introduction to our discussion today. And I'm just going to play that.
Okay, it's Friday morning, and again, the queues for the food bank is just absolutely incredible. And again, it's gone up to our office. And really, if you've never actually seen this with your own eyes, you would never believe it.
It's something that I had to document. I had to do a video of the people who are desperate, the people who have been forgotten about, the lost souls. When they actually see the queues and they see what we're doing, they're actually seeing hands-on the heartbreaking situation when it comes to families who have not been allowed to claim universal credit, to the self-employed who lost their jobs, to mums and dads who were on 0-hour contracts. You know, so they got sacked instantly. The nannies, the cleaners, the bar staff who didn't get furloughed, you know. The public had a perception on who used food banks. Everyone uses food banks when they've no money. Food banks are classless. And they're growing, especially the independent food banks who have been set up to maybe help the neighbours, and then it grows to a little community-based hub where if it wasn't for that community-based independent food bank, you know what? Families would go hungry. What's going on just now is going to get worse when the people who have been furloughed are going to go back to work. And the following day, these businesses are going to be bankrupt. It's not going to be there. So this moment in time is the beginning of a huge, huge, huge depression. It's going to be something like we'll never ever see in our lifetimes again. And people should prepare. That's what I think, what's going on in the UK just now, especially London.
Do you think we can cope with this?
We've not really got a choice, have we? We've got to, but I think Billy's completely right. The terrifying thing is, you know, we regularly run out of food. And like Billy said, you know, you've got to then leg it to the shop to try and get stuff in to make sure that children have got food in the stomach, or an old person who's on their own is going to get something dropped on the doorstep. And yeah, absolutely. I think we're kind of almost in, as much as it's bad, we're kind of in the eye of a storm at the moment because of the self-isolation and everything that's going on. There's so many people that are desperate at the minute that are, for not even people that are on benefits, it's people that have been furloughed that are struggling to then continue to pay the bills on 80% of the salary. People have got all the kids at home. You know, I've put 3 hampers together today for families that are absolutely desperate and that haven't got food to feed those children. I've never known anything like this. I mean, We Shall Have been going 6 years now. I'm up to feeding between 80 and 100 a day just from my front door, and that's without the food parcels that are going out and the food bank referrals. It's absolutely, food poverty has gone catastrophically high, I think. The fact is, hunger is right across this country at the moment. I used to get trolled quite a lot from people who were saying, oh, you know, they're all scroungers, they're all benefit cheats, or whatever, and that's why they're going to food banks. I think people are becoming less judgmental of why people are hungry, because more people are becoming hungry, if that makes any sense. I think people are seeing the reality of it a little bit more, but we need to get that out there. Because I think the other thing is there's a real stigma about turning to a food bank, and people are embarrassed about it. That's the big thing that we need to achieve, is that when people need help, they don't sit there hungry or feeding the kids and then going hungry themselves. They need to ask for the help.
I don't. I mean, I hope you heard all that well. I mean, it's some of the quality wasn't great at the end, but I think everyone got the gist of it. The fact is that this crisis is getting bad. In London, there was evidence of that there, and there's obviously evidence there in Manchester, near Manchester. I've invited Ian Byrne, who's run Foodbank support in Liverpool through football fans. Are you there, Ian?
Yeah, me and Crispin, yeah.
What I might do, because you're you've obviously been doing this for a long time, and also you're in Parliament, so you've got some influence there. I thought what I'd do is go through talking to people across the country, and then at the end maybe I could ask you to come back in and talk about what you think we could do about this, and what your own experience is of this as well.
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
I'll come back to you, but I mean, this is sort of I wanted to present a clear case that this is going on everywhere, and not just in London or even just in Manchester. So to start with, I was going to ask Nikki in Birmingham.
Hello.
Hi, Nikki.
Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah. We haven't got very long to talk to each person, but could you tell us what's going on in Birmingham?
So Birmingham's huge. As like a local authority, I'm a councillor there. I represent like an inner city ward. So we're like the highest populated local authority. And so far we've all kind of come together to like a Brum together. It's an organisation called Brum Together, 60 different groups working together. So far we've given out 23,000 food parcels to people, 7,000 hot meals, activity packs for kids. We're seeing people in desperate needs every single day. Since we've started as well, we've kind of seen where the gaps are in the city. So we've started up a baby bank as well. So we're not just, we're helping families with things like nappies, formula milk, baby food, because it's really expensive having like little ones. A little pouch of baby food that you feed a baby with one meal is £1. So it's really expensive to feed babies. So we've kind of set up a baby bank in my house. We have deliverers come and take nappies across the city. We've got kids living in temporary accommodation that don't have any space, don't have any facilities to make hot meals. So bringing them a food parcel isn't going to help that family. And we've seen queues outside of our food banks as well. I was in our big distribution centre, and there was a queue of about 30 people waiting outside half an hour before it opened. So it's really heartbreaking. It's happening everywhere. You see it here in Birmingham really badly. We've got single mums and parents not being able to provide nappies for their kids. And then it's people that have been on 0-hour contracts or people that have been furloughed. It's really not discriminated against any groups at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you, Nikki. As I say, I've got so many people. I'll move on. Andy in Stoke.
Hi, Crispin. Am I mute or unmute?
No, you're unmuted. I can see you. Yeah. So what's the situation in Stoke?
Yeah, it's pretty dire, mate. When you asked about this, I went to get some details. And if you look at May last year, remember we're only 3 weeks into the 4 weeks of May this year, about 3,800 kilograms they received into the food bank hub. This year, it's nearly 16,000, almost 4 times as many. And I think that seeing year on year, and that's only 3/4 of May this year, that's amazing. You know, it's an horrific amount. It's amazing that people have donated that much, but you know that's all going out as well, and the scale of that is just immense, isn't it? You know, and this is everywhere. Interesting that was it Nikki just before talked about nappies. Well, there's a nappy project in Stoke that delivers around here, and they've been really under pressure as well. I haven't got figures from them, but they've been looking for donations, and they've got a £25,000 donation from one individual today, which shows the scale of the problem. And similarly, we've got other comrades who are working in the period power campaign, providing sanitary towels, and there's a huge demand on that as well. So it's everywhere, and I agree, it's all sorts of basic necessities. I think that's the point, Chris, isn't it? Basic necessities that people are really, really desperate for. And yeah, it's all around the country, I'm certain.
Well, thanks, Andy. Christina in Essex.
Hi, Crispin.
You work for a food bank?
Well, I'm in close contact with them because, you know, I'm activist and so I'm active in my local area. So I'm in regular contacts and just organising donations, etc., etc. There was a massive shortage of. Oh, sorry. Go on.
What's the situation in terms of demand for food banks where you?
Since lockdown, up by 300%. It's come down slightly. It's still 60% busier than this time last year. So they've seen a massive increment, and just as a local community, we're just working on initiatives to, you know, keep a steady supply of donations going in, really. But not only that, they've been very short of, you know, like PPE. So we've been like, that was something that I had to source, was get PPE made for them, because I don't think that's very readily thought about. And also, they also have a very short supply of bags for life, because obviously the products that they, a lot of the products are non-perishable, and, you know, they're so heavy that they need these bags for life, and that's quite difficult, is sourcing things that are not always thought about. You know, they need these bags so they can pack up the products. They need PPE constantly for volunteers. So it's kind of ongoing work all the time, really.
So I mean, you're not in the main city. You're sort of in the suburbs or out in towns in Essex.
London suburb, and where we are is really very close to leafy parts of Essex. So, you know,
you wouldn't think that would be a place where there'd be big demand.
Not that increment. I mean, obviously, it's always been quite. It's there for a reason, and it's been there for a few years. So obviously there was a demand, but to go up by 300% since lockdown is a massive figure. So,
right. Well, thank you, Christina. I have to move on. Mukesh.
Yeah. From sunny Hounslow.
You're in Hounslow. I saw your open kitchen in the road on Great West Road, and I'd never seen it before in all the years I was going through Hounslow, and I was quite amazed at the queue. How much has demand for your free food increased in the last few weeks or months?
Well, we give it very simply. Before it was a community cafe, and the difference, unlike a food bank, was that anybody, regardless, could go in there and get a hot meal, and quite often also they would be able to take a little bit with them, like a bottle of water or something like that. Since it started and we had to do the lockdown, the premises has changed from being a community cafe to being a community collection point. So originally, before lockdown, it was about 125 meals a day were being produced and no home deliveries. As of last week, there are now 350 meals being collected daily. That's between the hours of 12 and 1 and 6 and 7 in the evening. And then in addition, a home delivery service has started because there are so many people who are in the shielding and vulnerable category. And there are now 75 plus meals being delivered, which services about 125 people. So if you can imagine, from an organization which was set up just to provide about 125 to suddenly producing nearly 500 meals a day, that's just absolutely mind-blowing. And as long as we've got the volunteers, because some of them are furloughed, it's fine. But once the people stop being furloughed and we don't have the volunteers, it's going to be a challenge. Also, the donations are coming in from the local community. my own self, and you would have read my story, is that my own Rotary Club, which I'm a member of, what we did was to actually donate, not necessarily directly to the open kitchen, but we paid their bill at the warehouse so that we knew that their products and whatever they needed was going to be used for the people of Hounslow, rather than being lost in a huge charity. And that was welcome. And all of our councillors, and we've got the Prime Minister down there, Alan Mitchell.
Oh, we can't reveal who he's in disguise. Yeah.
Yeah. So he and along with other councillors have actually been helping out on the days. They've got all the PPE on and everything else. But I think the most important thing is that many of the food banks have actually having to consolidate. One of our areas of deprivation, in those particular areas, 2 of the 3 of the food banks have had to combine because there was so much demand that they couldn't necessarily service everybody. So they consolidated their assets, consolidated their servicing to the clients. And then the great thing has been done is that, like the other people have talked about, is that we've had these pop-up food banks. And I mean literally pop-up food banks. They've been there since the lockdown because of the genuine need from people. And I think the issue is going to be is once, as the lockdown is released, will these pop-up food banks be able to survive, or do they have to do what other food banks have had to do, is consolidate? And my experience of working in America and with the Trussell Trust is that you're going to end up having an entity like the Trussell Trust or the Salvation Army or the Red Cross having to do far more work than ever before. That's my tuppence worth, mate.
All right. Thank you, Mukesh. Margaret, you're in Worthing. Are you there?
Yes.
Worthing sounds to me quite a well-off town, or I mean, I'm probably generalising a little bit there. But it's not a Labour stronghold. It's not. What's the situation in Worthing?
You're right. It is not particularly poor, but there are parts of it, Broadwater, and a couple of other wards that are in the 20% most deprived wards. And we started what we thought would be a temporary food bank because a community house closed down during the lockdown, and now it's gone up 8 times the amount of food that we're giving out since it started, 14th of April. And I think, and the council started to talking about consolidating. A lot of the food banks were moving into the town hall, assembly hall. We were operating north of Worthing. And that I think they've had an increase. We've got a vegan food bank, we've got a soup kitchen. There's so much poverty, and you just don't really know until you're looking for it and trying to find people, encourage them to come out and accept help, because a lot of people, it's the stigma, and they won't. And I've been trying to reach them by the schools, because the schools often know who's going to need and who might not come forward. So that's one of the ways we're helping. But we deliver at the moment. We don't have queues because we're keeping the social distancing by delivering, and we've got volunteers help deliver to people. So you wouldn't really know how many that there were just by looking at queues, because we don't have queues. But on the other side, we also have a huge amount of generosity from the general public, giving so much food, donating when people stand in the supermarket. So, but I mean, there's people fleeing domestic violence and suddenly going into temporary accommodation. There's all of these other stories going on, which there's the furloughing, the taxi drivers that haven't got any income. There's so many other people now. I was trying to there was a grandmother with a care order for the 3-month-old baby, and all of these have suddenly had to come and get help. So there's just so many stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on the show and telling us what's going on there. Jim in Brighton. I've heard you do you provide food every night. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And
twice on a Sunday.
What's your experience of what's happening at the moment?
So I think Brighton was fairly organised before the virus came in, because we've got like 2 levels. We've got a surplus food network, and we've got an emergency food network. The emergency food network is the food banks, and the surplus food network is kind of like 4 or 5 bigger guys that have been collecting food from, you know, the whole of Sussex. And so we were well organised due to the fact that we've got the second worst homeless crisis in the UK. But then this virus came along, and it was very complex for us, because many of the food banks had to close, many of the food stations closed. Within 24 hours, all the outlets for hot food in the city were closed apart from us. And so we kind of contacted the police and got police to come along with us, and they enforced the social distancing, and it worked very well. And so after like 3 weeks of the police assisting us, they gave us a clean bill of health and said, no, just keep going. So we were more organised probably than most cities in the country in some respects, but I don't think even we were ready for the onslaught, for the tidal wave of people that needed help who were not necessarily homeless. And I think that's what surprised us. We're now doing 75 people every Friday. We're going through 2.2 tonne of food. We're collecting fresh vegetables and cooking eight big meals a week. And we're totally volunteer driven on the organisation. So, and it doesn't seem to be improving. I think we're getting better at feeding larger numbers of people, but it really doesn't. I don't get a feel that anything government's doing is improving it, and I can see a whole lot of reasons why it's going to get much worse. So, and I think Brighton will spearhead how bad it gets, simply because we've got so many rich properties and so many poor people that can't afford even the rent. So it doesn't look good.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Mark in Workington. Mark, are you there, Mark? Can you hear me? No, I've muted you by mistake. There you go, Mark. No,
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Because I work with Julie as well. Julie delivers it on the ground, and we sat back. We set off doing this probably 12, 18 months ago, and we've got a history in healthy eating and stuff like that. We'd previously been involved in food cooperatives and targeting fresh fruit and vegetables, because we're in some of the, like others, in the worst 20% wards in the country. So we started 12 months ago, and we started with food pantries. And I mean, Julie will fill you in on that better than me, but it's got worse. It's got worse in this COVID-19. We're going to communities now, and people are desperate. They're desperate because they're furloughed. They're desperate because the benefit system. They're just totally desperate around how, especially now that some of the kids that are on school meals, how are they being fed? So it's this impact of what's happened, and people just aren't picking it up. As I said, Julie can outline the schemes that we run, but it's just a total fear. The benefit system isn't working for ordinary people. There are more people slipping into it now. People who would never ever think would ask for universal credit, and I think that there's a middle class being dragged into all this now, and you'll see it becoming a real electoral issue, because the middle classes are starting to squeak, and that isn't a good thing for politicians, professional politicians, anyways.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I'll try and get hold of Julie. I can't find her at the moment, but I've got Liz from Liverpool. Liz.
Hiya, Crispin. You okay?
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about the food banks per se, because you've got Ian on with you, and he's the expert. And frankly, as a city, I don't know what we'd do without him and fans supporting food banks. They're absolutely amazing. As a council, obviously one of our first things was to set up a COVID helpline in response to the current pandemic. And just from that perspective, in the first 7 weeks, we saw 6,000 requests for urgent food support come through that helpline, which is massive. But we also allocate ward counts to something called Mayoral Neighbourhood Fund. And the Mayor gave every ward of the city an extra £15,000 to respond purely to COVID. And bear in mind that we allocate Neighbourhood Fund on a financial year basis. So in the first 7 weeks of the financial year, we'd spent 40% of that, 186,000, just supporting community food provision and organisations that were dealing in their community. So, and that's before you even get into the work that Ian will talk about with the food banks. So the need is absolutely huge. And obviously, as you know, I won't talk too long, but as my day job is I manage 2 of our Sure Start centres in the city. So this has been creeping up. 11 years ago when I started, I'd never heard of a food bank. The last financial year alone, we served just under 6,000 hot meals to children in the 2 wards of the city I work in, and that's outside of going to any food bank provision. We've now had such high levels of food poverty that we have to build hot meals into sessions where we're delivering about early learning because the need is there. And when you're there on a daily basis seeing a 4 or 5 year old come up for their 3rd plate of food because they're starving.
Yeah.
Just heartbreaking and not something that you would ever want to see. No, it's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz, for coming on. I'm just trying to get the evidence really. I'm appalled at what I'm hearing and everything. It's just this idea that this isn't happening is the main thing. I want to make sure we can really say this is a crisis and it should be taken seriously. Now, I just wanted to finish our roundup of people by speaking to Jane in Nottingham.
Hello,
Are you there, Jane?
Yep, I am. I'm a
quite unique initiative. The Labour Party in Broxtowe has actually set up its own food bank. I don't think this is going on anywhere else. But so what's the demand like in Nottingham?
In Nottingham, yeah, we're just outside the city. We're in one of the suburbs, but this is you can see this isn't my house. This is Broxtowe Labour Community Hub. Those are the bags waiting to go out in a minute. So we set up this 10 weeks ago because we used to have a few tins outside for our regular users. Then we were told to shut the community hub, and we said no, we're going to do our own. These users are still there. And we want to do it under the Broxtowe Labour banner. And now from putting a notice on the front of our door, we're delivering over 100 parcels a week. So all our members are involved. They come and pack. The fire service deliver for us. A disabled member is at home taking all the orders. This is about giving a purpose to our members, but also getting into the heart of the communities that we should do as Labour. It's not about charity. It's about solidarity and charity, not charity. It's about socialism. And it's about involving our members in what we do and getting into the communities that need us during this pandemic. And I urge every CLP on here to try and, we haven't got an MP in Broxtowe, a Labour MP. So this is about a community hub. Every CLP should have one of these. It's funded by the unions, Unite, CWU, and our members contribute every year. And we've had it for about 18 months. It's not usually like this. This is usually our meeting room, and it is open for 5 days a week for people to come in and seek advice. But this is what we can do in a pandemic. And the responses we've had, as we said, we've raised £10,000 in 10 weeks just from members' support, and local businesses are offering to work with us. We've had donations from the co-op, Asda, Fair Share, local bakeries give us food at the end of the day. It's been an absolute community spirit. We're back in the heart of the communities that we should be as Labour, and I'm very proud to do the food parcels and the food banks under Labour. That's why we use our Usdaw famous carrier bags, because I knew this is what we wanted to do and we should be proud to be doing that. It won't be what we do all the time because we've got to tackle the politics side of it as well, and we are trying to do that in conjunction with providing food, but the increase is massive. We never thought it would. It's a full-time job for us at the moment, but we're happy to do it now, but we do need an exit strategy on it.
Thank you.
This is what every CLP should have. I cannot emphasise it enough.
No, I agree. I think it'd be good if the CLPs had more funding from the Central Party. I think the Central Party gets like 95% of the members' subs. If the CLPs got 50%, they'd probably be able to to hire a hub and start doing that. I mean, it's lucky you've got the sponsorship from the unions. I don't want to divert into that issue, but thank you very much for coming on. We've heard from everywhere, I mean, all over the country, from rural constituencies, suburbs, in the north, in the south, in the Midlands. Ian, what I can't understand is why this issue hasn't been made massive. And what's your take on the size of the problem?
Thanks, Crispin, for inviting me. Now, it was short notice, but we got there in the end. I'd like to thank everyone on here that's actually doing something within their communities. I think what Jane just said is absolutely spot on. This is we're in a humanitarian crisis. That's why we set transport and food banks up 5 years ago, when we seen queues similar to the video what you're seeing outside at a community centre in Anfield, where I live, and actually thought it was a queue for the bingo. We were having a meeting with one of the community leaders, and there's a queue outside, and I said that was 5 years ago, and she said it was the food bank. So you'd heard about food banks, but you hadn't, when it hits you, when it's on your home patch like that, and you see people of all shapes, colour, denominations queuing up for food and getting a bag of whatever they're given, I thought it was quite demeaning. So we went into the back of the pantry, and she showed us the pantry, and it was run solely on donations. It was a community food bank, and it was pitiful. They had a big bag of pasta, putting it into little plastic sweet bags, and it was pitiful, and it really shocked me to be calling me comrade Dave Kelly. So what we decided, we went home and we thought, what can we do? So we were involved in fan activism to working with both Liverpool and Everton football clubs. So we come up with fan support and food banks, and the idea was really simple. It was, if 60,000 Liverpudlians turn up one Saturday and then 45,000 Evertonians the other Saturday, both within a mile of each other in some of the poorest wards in the country, if everyone donated a tin of food, we thought it'd alleviate the problem of food poverty in the area. And we should always remember, it's a scandal that there is a food bank. I think, as Liz said, 10 years ago there wasn't. And as I said, a humanitarian disaster created by austerity has come about. So fan support and food bank started from that, and then it's grown. It's one of the growth industries, food poverty. And we're now supplying 35% of all foods going into Liverpool food banks, which is coming from the football fans, who are a much maligned race in this country. So football fans actually do something really positive back to communities. We know it's right across the country because we've got fan support and food banks groups now right across the country, and most football clubs across the country. Newcastle support fan support and food banks supply most of the food into their food banks. We've got Leeds. We've also brought both Manchester United and Manchester City working together, which was a difficult task. So we've got the Manchester clubs working together with Liverpool and Everton. So all this it's unknown territory. It's proper working class solidarity and aiding communities. But as I said, it's something that we shouldn't have to do. But rest assured, Crispin, this has been going on since austerity started. It's grown worse and worse right throughout the country. So there's nowhere untouched by food poverty. But what COVID's done is shone a light on many of the structural issues why we've got food poverty. And I think that's where we are now, with zero-hour contracts, casualisation of labour, a welfare state that's not fit for purpose. And what has happened now is, as I said, a lot of people who didn't think that they were ever going to use a food bank 14 weeks ago are now in a position where they've got to use food banks. And I had a really, it was a really harrowing conversation with a friend of mine who was a musician, fully booked out, gigs every week, doing really well as a family. His wife was a head stewardess on EasyJet. So within a week, his whole life turned upside down, signed on universal credit, and was then using food banks. Now, this was a man who raised thousands of pounds for us for our food banks in Liverpool. So that sort of really showed you how easy it is to slip into circumstances which we're all battling against. But for me, the most important thing is, as a Labour Party, is tackling the structural issues which cause food poverty. What we're doing here is a stick and plaster. We're just helping people out in need, trying to do as much as we can to keep people's heads above above the water and basically keep them alive. But rest assured, I think it was Mark said, this is now a humanitarian disaster which is creeping right across the country and into millions of households. Also, we know the furlough scheme will eventually start getting wound down. That's going to be a huge issue, an absolutely huge issue. So we can't rely on people like all the good people on here, all the good people in the communities. You just can't rely on councils who've been cut to the bone to keep, trying to pump money into like councils' hands, like Liz has said. It ain't going to work. You can't rely on like a Victorian style, people were going out and donating, because it just won't work. It's become such an endemic structural problem in this country. And food poverty is going to be one of the big things over the next 6 to 8 weeks for so many people across this country. And we've got millions of people now. I think the Trussell Trust have just said 81% usage up from last year. We've got hundreds of thousands of children who haven't accessed the school vouchers. So where do we go as a Labour Party? What do we call for? For me, I'm looking really interestingly at universal basic income. I think that's something we should be exploring and really looking at in depthly. Look at the tests which are going on across the world, and Spain's looking at doing something now. And, we can't tinker around the edges. We cannot tinker around the edges of food poverty now. We can't tinker around. We've got to get in there. We've got to sort out why so many people are falling into this trap. And we've got to fundamentally reshape society. So food becomes a right. It should be a right.